Music is one of the most powerful forms of art that we have in our world. I don't know if anybody music people, you like playing music around your house? I can always tell, she's not in here, so I can say it. I can always tell when Lindsay gets home. She just took some of the kids back to class, but I can always tell when Lindsay gets home, not because the car is pulling in the driveway, not because the lights hit the windows, but because I can hear the music from down the street playing in the car as she's pulling into the driveway. She loves music, and we love music around our house. But emotionally, music can lift you up. Right? You hear a happy song or a happy music, it's like, oh, I like that song. Sometimes you don't even pay attention to the words of the song, right? Because it just has this feel that's like, ooh, that feels good. That's uplifting, right? We would never say that, men, but we get it. And then it can also bring you down, right? Music can bring you down. If you listen to something that sounds depressing, it can lead you into a dark place emotionally. If that's all that you listen to, it's kind of this up and down. And then music can also trigger all kinds of memories. Because we remember it so well. For me, if you were to put 90s country music on, I could probably sing every single word of every song that comes on. And it puts me right back as a young kid taking road trips with our family in our big conversion van all the way to the mountains, going to Tennessee, like 90s country blaring the whole way. Like I can think about it. Do y'all remember the conversion van era? That was fun, right? Y'all remember those Astro vans and the big giant ones? And it's like your grandpa had the one that had all the wood accents and the big center console. I can smell the cinnamon mints that my grandpa used to have in his. And some of y'all might laugh at those stories, but just a couple of months ago, you were, because music is so powerful, right? You may not have heard the songs in a long time, but as the Super Bowl halftime show came on, you were singing and dancing and doing all things that your kids were like, whoa, what is going on in our house? Because it took you back. Chances are, if you come into my house unannounced, you're going to find that we're playing music really, really loud. Somebody's singing really, really loud, and sometimes all of it's going on at the same time. Our house is what you would call a musical composer's nightmare. It's a disaster all the time. But sometimes there's worship music playing in the downstairs floor, and the kids are singing something totally different upstairs, and it's going on at the same time, and it's kind of chaotic, but we love it. We love hearing music in our house. Lindsay obviously loves worship music. My dad's a worship pastor, so I grew up around music, and so we just play it all the time. But one of the things that I love in our house that takes place is, this is not to say that we have it all figured out or we've got parenting figured out, because I can guarantee you, come to our house about 7:30 p.m. as we're getting ready for bed, and we'll show you how much we don't have a handle on parenting. But one of the things that we do is we play worship music in our house all the time. More times than not, worship music is playing. If it's not a show, it's worship music. We're playing it all the time. We're singing it out. We've got it playing on YouTube on a TV, or it's playing on Bluetooth, or something is going on with music in our house. And so as we do that, one of the things that I love is I love hearing, as we're going throughout the day, I hear the kids start singing upstairs, and they start singing a worship song over here. And over downstairs, or in our schoolroom outside, we have a portable building outside the kids go and do school. And you can walk outside, and you can hear them shouting from the top of their lungs inside the building, worship music. Sometimes it's yelling, but sometimes it's worship music. But when we sing songs, it builds our faith, it grounds us, it reminds us of who we're singing to. And I love the fact that when we gather corporately like this, and we have people from different walks of life and different social statuses and economic status and all the different races, and we gather together in a group like this, and we lift our voices and we sing together. It's a beautiful thing that takes place, because we're reminding ourselves that we're a part of something bigger than just us. And we're building our faith. And so today, as we look at the last chapter of Habakkuk, we're going to see that music or singing isn't something new to our world or our culture, or to what we would call the world of Christianity, or the world of following Yahweh or God. But thousands of years ago, a prophet in the Middle East was singing a song to God in the middle of what was a prayer became a song in an incredibly difficult situation. And so today, as we close out this series, let's look at this last chapter. And if you're new with us, we've been studying this minor prophet, the book of Habakkuk, and I hope that it's been encouraging to you. It's been challenging, but I hope it's been encouraging to you as well, because there's something about the book of Habakkuk that you look at from the surface and it feels a little bit downcast, right? There's a lot of lament and frustration of Habakkuk, like, Lord, where are you? When are you going to act? When are you going to move? There's God, where are you? And we've all been in those moments, right? We resonate with that, but God has also responded to Habakkuk, and he's told him his plan and what is going to happen. And now Babylon is coming to bring judgment on the people. But it's a sobering book, because we find ourselves in this story as well. because I think for all of us in this room, we could probably relate to a season or a time or a moment where we have felt like that God has abandoned us in our life at one time. We may not admit that publicly. We may not say it out loud because we may feel embarrassed to do that. But as Habakkuk did in lamenting and saying, Lord, where are you? How could you let this happen? When are you going to move or act? Like there is a season and a time that we have felt like that more than likely in our lives, and we resonate with what is happening. But I want us to pay special attention today how Habakkuk ends his book in chapter 3. Let's look at Habakkuk 3, chapter 3, verses 1 through 2. He says it's a prayer of Habakkuk the prophet according to Shigionoth. There's a name for your next child right there, okay? Verse 2, O Lord, I have heard the report of you, and your work, O Lord, do I fear. In the midst of the years, revive it. In the midst of the years, make it known. In wrath, remember mercy. In wrath, remember mercy. Now, we're going to work our way through this entire chapter today, and again, I don't want to scare you because we're not going to spend time breaking down every single verse, but what we are going to do is spend most of our time in the first 2 verses today, and then in the last 3 verses, and then some in the middle. We're going to kind of speed through today and kind of give you an overview of what is taking place, but we really wanted to focus in on the first 2 and the last 3 today. So let's look back at verse 1. It says, a prayer of Habakkuk the prophet according to Shigionoth. This ending chapter likely started for Habakkuk as a written prayer. As a prayer to the Lord. He's lamented twice. The Lord has responded twice. And now, instead of lamenting, he starts to pray to God. There's a shift that takes place between chapters 2 and chapter 3, where there's this, no longer is it lament, but now it is prayer to God, right? He's starting to cry out to God. But many believe that this chapter would later become a song to be corporately sung in the temple during the fall festivals. Not fall festival like a church, but the festivals that would happen in the fall. But this strange word Shigionoth it's a transliteration, which means like it comes from, but not really. They don't really know what word it was, or even really what it means today. But that word carries some kind of musical connotation. Shigionoth, kind of weird word. Like we don't really know what it means, but it has some form of musical note to it. And then most scholars agree that if you look at this chapter, if you look at 3 times, you'll see in your indentions there, you're going to see the word Selah. Selah. Any 90s Christian music fans, right? You remember that band? Some of you are flashing back right now like, oh, I can sing it now. It's still playing on KSBJ, I'm sure of it. Sorry, that was a bad jab at KSBJ. But this word Selah, somebody said, it's the truth. No. This word Selah, again with Shigionoth, we don't know the exact meaning of it, but what most believe that it means is to pause or to stop, to reflect in a sense of a prayer or a song, to pause and to stop and to reflect on what you just sang or what you just prayed. We do this in worship, right? If we were to say, okay, we're going to spend 20 minutes of worship, and Josh and the team all there is words for 20 minutes. How many feel like that would be like drinking from a fire hydrant? Right? It's going to be like right in your face, like hitting you in the face, like, wow, this is a lot to take in this moment right now. Like this is a little bit chaotic. But to Selah, to pause and to reflect on what did I just sing and who am I singing to? There's a beauty in that of just like, I'm going to sit for a moment and reflect on what the Lord is doing right now. All that to say, we have to see chapter 3 for what it is, a song. It's a song. And so today, I'm going to invite you to sing all the words of chapter 3 out loud together. If you could do that. You ready? No, don't do that. The main idea is this. Singing God's praises through challenging times, of life strengthens our faith. Singing God's praises through the challenging times of life strengthens our faith. And so as we go through this, keep this main idea in mind. This idea of singing, though, in challenging times feels a bit weird or foreign to us. Could you imagine being in a doctor's office and you get a bad report, and as soon as the report comes, you just start singing a song? Hospital security probably is going to be coming on the way, right? Somebody come get the crazy person out. There's an awkwardness to it. Like, what do you mean by like singing? Like, could you imagine going to war and in the middle of battle, just standing up like, I'm going to sing a song right now. I think this is the appropriate time. I'm going to sing a song. But they would do that in Bible times, right? There was just part of the deal. They would blow a trumpet. They would sing a song. They would declare something. And even now Habakkuk's saying, like, listen, I'm going to sing the song to the Lord in the middle of my most challenging time of my life. Now, think back to one of the darkest moments of our history. One of the most touching things that we know about the atrocities of slavery is that for many of the slaves, they would hold these secret church services around their plantation. You read stories and books. If you want a good book to read, there's a book by, I can't remember, Matt Carter, and it's called Steal Away Jesus. It's a story of Charles Spurgeon becoming unlikely friends with the African-American pastor that fled from slavery. It was an incredible book. But they would go around the plantation, and they would have these secret services, and they would sing what we would call plantation hymns or spirituals. Beautiful, beautiful songs that were written. They were hiding in secret because many of the slave owners did not want their slaves to know and to hear or to sing about the freedom that is found in God. Didn't want them to hear about that. They didn't want them to hear that there's freedom in pursuing the person and the work of Jesus. And so these people singing these spiritual hymns, they would sing songs like "Jesus, Keep Me Near the Cross," which says, "Jesus, keep me near the cross. There a precious fountain, free to all, a healing stream flows from Calvary's mountain." They would sing songs like "Were You There?" Some of y'all are flashing back to childhood church right now. Were you there? Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they crucified my Lord? And then one of my favorites, "Steal Away Jesus." It says, steal away to Jesus, steal away home. I haven't got long to stay here." These beautiful songs were, although these slaves were facing something that is so inhumane, so hard to imagine, indefensible, what were they doing? What were they putting their focus on? And even though they're facing the most challenging time of their life, they were singing songs of faith to the one that created them. Now, for us, what does that look like for us to sing songs of faith in the middle of challenging times? I'm not saying you have to stand in a doctor's office after a bad report and start singing, but I am saying there is something to the fact that when we worship through our pain and our suffering, there's something that happens in our faith. There's something that changes in the atmosphere of our spirit when we start to worship through our pain and our suffering. These songs that the slaves would sing, these hymns, these spirituals, they as faith would rise, this became kind of an escape from them, from their circumstance. Like I'm escaping from my present situation, and I'm going to put my focus on God. As these songs were written under the crack of a whip or endless work and suffering, they found themselves focusing on Jesus. Let's look at verse 2. He says, "O Lord, I've heard the report of you and your work. O Lord, do I fear? In the midst of the years, revive it. And in the midst of the years, make known. In wrath, remember mercy." In wrath, remember mercy. This verse is the only request or the petition that Habakkuk makes in this entire chapter. To revive it, to remember your people, to remember mercy. It's the only one. And it's interesting that most of this chapter is praise, as a prayer. But what do we find ourselves many times when we spend time in prayer? What do we find ourselves doing first before anything else? We start making petitions to the Lord. And I'm not saying that the Lord doesn't want to hear your petitions, and I'm not saying that there isn't something in the fact that the Lord wants to hear what's going on in our life. He knows it, and he wants to be near it. But there is something to the fact, even as he taught his disciples to pray, what is the first thing he says? "Hallowed be thy name." Like there is a praise factor in praying that we've got to buy into and get a hold of in our Christian walk, that when we begin prayer, we should first look towards heaven and say, "God, you are worthy of everything." There is a beauty in that. And that's what the slaves were doing. They were focusing on Jesus among all their situation. They had many things to focus on, right? They had many pains and many struggles, but yet they're focused on the goodness of God. He says, "O Lord," in this second verse. This is a capital L, meaning Yahweh, covenant name of God, is personal to Habakkuk. He's not distant. He's not removed. He's not far off. He's not ignoring Habakkuk anymore. Now Habakkuk, through the work of lament and through the discipline of prayer, what does he now start to? He starts to say, like, Yahweh, God, your covenant God. I know you. I know what you've done. Like I have a personal relationship with you. I'm communicating with you. There's this closeness in Habakkuk's prayer. that he knows him. And he says, I've heard the report. And I think something that's really been stirring in me and Lindsay recently is just what the Israelites did so well all throughout history, and even today, is they did so good from generation to generation, teaching the next generation to remember what the Lord had done. I think we miss this in our culture very, very much. For many of us, that we go through life and, it's kind of like you just have stories that you share, but like, are they marked? Are they memorized? Is there a memorial? Is there an altar, so to speak, of what the Lord has done in the life of your family from generation to generation? Like, look what he's done and how he's provided for our family. Do we do that with our families? There's something that's been stirring in Lindsay and I for that, but he says, I've heard the report. Generation to generation, I've seen your works, the works that you've done. And if you even think about it for us, like what all the Lord has done at this point in history, he's brought them out of slavery from Egypt, right? He's brought down Pharaoh and he's took them into the into the wilderness, and he provided for them. He gave them the law and the commandments, and then he brought them into the promised land. All these incredible works that the Lord had done for the people of Israel. And now Habakkuk stands here with judgment looming, Babylon marching towards the people of Judah. And what is Habakkuk doing? He's saying, Lord, I've seen what you've done in the past. I've seen you work. I've seen the miracles that have taken place. I've seen how you've transformed us as a people and how you brought us out of all these difficult situations. He says, I want you to revive it, Lord. Revive it. Revive what you've done in the people of God before. And what he's saying as he's recalling the work that God has done before, Habakkuk is saying this: would you work for redemption from Babylon like you did for us from Egypt? Would you work for us this removal, this escape from Babylon, as you have already done for the people of God from Israel? Now think about all the slavery and the things that they had to endure 400 years being under the dictatorship of Pharaoh and the people of Egypt. And now the Lord hears Habakkuk saying hundreds and hundreds of years later, like, I just want you to do what you've done before, Lord. I've seen it. I've heard about it. I've read about it. I've studied it. I've memorized it. Could you do it again? Then he says this interesting line. He says, in wrath, I want you to, can you remember mercy? This is such a faith-building but also challenging line, because what Habakkuk is doing here is he is submitting to the plan and the will of God here. God has already told him, listen, you may not understand it, but Babylon, I've raised them up, and I'm going to bring them into the people of Judah, and they're going to capture you. They're going to take you away, and you're going to be in bondage and captivity to them for 70 years. Like, you're going to be with them. There's nothing you can do about it. The plan is coming. And now Habakkuk stands back and he says, in your wrath, meaning like, yes, I see what you have done, like in what you're going to do. Your wrath is coming. Your judgment is coming, but I'm submitting to that. But Lord, could you also be merciful at the same time? I'm submitting to your plan, God. And it's almost like, I don't know if y'all ever did this, but I always appreciated it when my mom would give me a spanking more than when my dad would give me a spanking, right? The last thing I ever wanted to hear from my mom is like, your dad's on the way home from work. Oh no, please don't. It's like, spank me now, please. It's like, that was my mentality, because I knew if dad was coming, it was a different situation. And it's almost like Habakkuk is saying, like, Lord, I know that judgment is coming. Could you be merciful at the same time? Is it possible, God, for you to bring justice and mercy at the same time? Yeah, because he's God. He can bring justice and he can bring mercy. And there's a submission of to God's plan that Habakkuk has that should be encouraging to us. Now, this middle part, verses 3 through really 16, I believe, is going to be, we're going to speed through this a little bit. So we're going to read verses 3 through 7 here. Stay with me. God came from Teman, and the Holy One from Mount Paran, Selah. His splendor covered the heavens and the earth and was full of praise. His brightness was like the light rays shine, a flash from his hand, and there he veiled his power. He's talking about the mountain when God gave the law, right? And he's given the law to Moses. Remember, they're looking up to see the thunder and the lightning on the mountain coming down. This power that they see, it shakes the people, but there's also this veiledness to it of like, I'm not revealing fully to you my power. Before him went pestilence, and plague followed at his heels. He stood and he measured the earth. He looked and he shook the nations. Then the eternal mountains were scattered. The everlasting hills sank. His were the everlasting ways. Verse 7, I saw the tents of Cushan in affliction and the curtains of the land of Midian and did tremble. Now here, as Habakkuk is singing or praying these lines out, he's remembering the works of God in the past. And a couple of things I want us to point out I think are important this morning. First one is this, is that he stood and he measured the earth. He stood and he measured the earth. What Habakkuk is reminding of us this morning as we're reading this passage is the grandeur or the might and the power, the bigness, if I could say it that way, of who God is. And he's saying, like, think about how big God is, that he could stand, pause, and he measures the earth as we would measure out a picture frame before we hang it on the wall. The Lord is so big and so grand and so mighty, he pauses and he measures the earth. And he's reminding us of how big he is. And sometimes in our situation, whatever we're walking through, we need to remind ourselves as well of how big God is, that our situation is not too big for God to handle. When we're facing difficult times, right? Pain and suffering, those things, when they happen, they're right in front of our face, aren't they? They feel big, they feel nasty, they feel like Babylon is coming towards it. There's nothing else that we could see, but sometimes what Habakkuk is encouraging us to do is step back and realize that the God that we are praying to stands back and he measures the earth. The second thing is he mentions two cities, Cushan and Midian. Both of these countries were thorns in the side of Israel. Previous to Habakkuk's time, both of them God also dealt with. Cushan was the land of Cush, was the first oppressor to the people of Israel when they walked into the promised land. Remember, as it's I think it's chapter 3 of Judges, as they're going into the promised land, and they start to turn away from the Lord, and God raises up the judges so that he can lead the people, and they can, if things are going on, like kind of a prophet to the people of Israel, and they start turning from him, and then he gives them over to the people of Cush. He's like, listen, you don't want to follow me? Go for it. You can live this way the rest of your life. But then he raises up this judge named Othniel. I think it's in, like I said, Judges chapter 3. You can go there and read about it, where he raises them up and they capture and they overtake the people of Cush. So he says, I see the people of Cush. And then secondly, he says Midian. The Midianites, what we might call them, we read about their constant attack of Israel. But if we know the story, or if you know the story, God raised up Gideon to capture and to overtake the Midianites. And there's this beauty of what Habakkuk is saying here in this song, and he's recalling to himself, to the people of Judah, that God has rescued us from oppressors before. Like, that what we are about to face with the people of Babylon in Judah, this is not new to God. And this is not even new to the people of Israel. We've gone through this before. And every single time, what has happened? The Lord has rescued us. And it's almost like you get this sense that Habakkuk is trying to remind the people, like, hey, I know it's going to be tough. It's going to be difficult. But God's led us through this before. He's got it. Just take a deep breath. Just try to relax as much as possible. I know that we're going to be uprooted. We're going to have to live in this foreign land. But let's just think about how God's provided for us before. He's bringing some grounding, some centrality to what they're about to face. Here's something that, as you read these words of Habakkuk, something that I think is good for us to think on this morning, some questions to ask. Where has God worked in your life? Where has God worked incredible ways in your life? How has he provided for you? How has God delivered you? Some of you in this room, you've been delivered from some really difficult and challenging things. Addictions and mental thoughts and all the things that the Lord has brought people through and from. Like, there's things that the Lord has done for you that's like, yes, I need to remember those things. I need to remember where he has brought me from. Where's God sustained you? Where's he provided for you? In the middle of your difficult season, the call that Habakkuk gives us is to focus on God's works of the past rather than the pain of the present. And he's not saying to minimize, I'm not saying this to minimize your pain or your suffering, but I think what Habakkuk is teaching us is very, very important here. Instead of focusing on the pain and what is right in front of our face, the suffering that we're going through, Habakkuk is saying, I want you to put that to the side for a moment, and I want you to just think and reflect on what God has done in your life already. There is value when we pause and reflect on what he's done in our lives. There's value in that. Let's look at verse 8. He says, was your wrath against the rivers, O Lord? Was your anger against the rivers, or your indignation against the sea when you rode on your horses or on your chariot of salvation? You stripped the sheath from your bow, calling for many arrows. Selah. You split the earth with rivers. The mountains saw you and writhed. The raging waters swept on. The deep gave forth its voice. It lifted its hands on high. Verse 11, the sun and the moon stood still in their place at the light of your arrows as they sped and the flash of your glittering spear. You marched through the entire earth of fury. You threshed the nations in anger. You went out for the salvation of your people, for the salvation of your anointed. You crushed the head of the house of the wicked, laying him bare from thigh to neck. Selah. Verse 14. You pierced with his own arrow. You pierced with his own arrows the heads of his warriors. Who came like a whirlwind to scatter me, rejoicing as if to devour the poor in secret. And you trampled the sea with your horses, and the surging water and the surging of mighty waters. This idea that there's kind of this theme in this current passage we're walking through is the sea, as it is with many of us. Like none of us, I don't think, would like to be abandoned or just like left at sea in the middle of this like tiny little boat by ourselves, would we? I don't think so. For most of us, we'd be terrified, right? Like the thought of the sea is a terrifying thought. How big and how wide it is, like how much of it is unexplored in our world today, still even today with all the technology that we have. And even in the ancient world, the sea was many times used as an illustration for fear. Like if you want to talk about fear, you talk about the sea because you never know what's going to take place as they're trying to take these ships in the middle of storms and trying to get from port to port. Like obviously Paul knows what that's like, right? Shipwrecked on an island. He knows the challenges of that in the New Testament, but it's saying that sea is just a fearful thing. And then many of the little G gods in the ancient world, they invoke thoughts of lightning and storms. And if you follow weather at all, this is kind of a season and a time of the year where a lot of storms start to pop up, right? The hot weather, the cold weather. We saw those storms that passed through a few years ago. And Lindsay makes fun of me because I'm an old man on Facebook and I'm all kinds of Facebook groups and I'm watching the weather and I'm like, what's going on? And where is this going to take place? And I follow storm chasers. I love it. Although I would be too afraid to be in the middle of it, right? I like from the distance, I like it, all right? But as these ancient gods focused on little g gods and lightning and storms, Habakkuk says, you, God, Yahweh, are above it all. That you are bigger than all of it. Like you're bigger than these gods of these other nations that say that he holds lightning in his hands. No, God is the creator of the lightning is what Habakkuk is saying. You control the rivers, you control the sea. All the things that make us fearful, God, you control them. And then again, in this passage, we see references that sound a lot like the past works of God. You might see horses and chariots and water, the sea, hearkening back to the Exodus when they left the nation of Egypt. And they crossed the Red Sea, and then the Lord crushes the people of Egypt as they're trying to pursue, and they end up in the bottom of the ocean or the bottom of the sea. You start to see this picture painted by Habakkuk of, again, the Exodus and other works. And while that is a part of it here, Habakkuk is also singing about the future. There is something about what Habakkuk is singing that he paints this picture of a warrior king that is coming in the future that is going to take all the wrong in the world and he's going to make it right. Now, you can imagine Habakkuk as he's praying this prayer, there's something about him that he's like, yeah, I want you to come now because I see Babylon off in the distance. I see them coming to me, but I need the warrior king, warrior God to come and take care of the people now. But there's something that Habakkuk, I don't know if he realized in the moment as God was speaking to him and he's praying this prayer that is focusing on the future, this idea of hope and waiting for the Messiah that we see as we get closer to the end of the Old Testament, looking towards the New Testament. And there's this hunger and this desire for this Messiah to come. And I think on Palm Sunday, what an appropriate passage for us to look through and study as there's this desire. We get to celebrate that he did come, but the way that he made his way into Jerusalem, as we know, looked very different from what the people of God expected. Right? They're expecting this warrior king to come in. I'm going to capture the city. I'm going to capture the people. No more are you going to be oppressed, right? The Romans, they're out of the picture. King Jesus is here. The Messiah is here. He's here and he's going to rule. He's going to reign you politically as a nation, make us a great nation again. But God comes in riding on the colt of a donkey in humbleness, because the saving that he was doing was much different than what they were expecting in the moment. But here's what we also know. No matter what you are facing, no matter what you're going through, and no matter what you will face in this life, here's what you do know, and what we should remember and reflect on, is that one day Jesus is coming again. And when he comes again, he's not coming riding on a colt of a donkey, is he? He's coming in power and strength and in might to make all the wrong right in the world. And when we think on that, it puts our suffering and our pain into perspective. It says, hey, yes, it is painful right now, but just know the King is coming. Let's look at verse 16. I hear and my body trembles. My lips quiver at the sound. Rottenness enters into my bones, and my legs tremble beneath me. Yet I quietly wait for the day of trouble to come upon the people who invade us. You can hear like the realness of Habakkuk here. Like he's like, I'm so scared that my legs are literally shaking. I don't know if you've been that scared before. You ever been that scared where your body just shakes and adrenaline just pumps up and you don't even know how to react? It's kind of like you just go into survival mode, right? Protection mode. But listen to this, even in his trembling, his faith in God was unwavering. And I think we have this idea in our church culture that faith and fear can't live in the same area or the same time. We have this idea, but here's what I would tell you. I think, yes, there is something to that, but as I read my Old Testament and read my Bible, I see over and over people that God used in the Old Testament that sometimes just had to do something while they were afraid. Do you see the difference there? Like there may have been, in our Bible reading plan, we've been reading about Gideon in the Judges. And Gideon, the night before he walked down to take over the Midianites, he's scared to death. He's already gone through this process, right? All the way down to the 300 men. The Lord sifts the people, and God has to tell him, like, listen, if you're still scared, I want you to go down and listen to the words of the people. He's still scared the night that he's about to capture them. But what was Gideon doing? He was doing it afraid, right? He was being obedient in the middle of his fear. And so I would encourage us, like when we're walking in this life, it doesn't mean that you're not going to have fear in the middle of what you're walking through. That's okay sometimes. But we still have to be obedient and act out in faith even in the middle of the fear, right? We still have to, even though we're scared, we still have to act. So we have to pay attention to that. Remind ourselves, as he did with Gideon, the Lord is with you, mighty warrior. Look back at chapter 1, verse 2. I want you to look at Habakkuk's first words. Go back to where we started this series. It says, "O Lord, how long shall I cry for help, and you will not save? You will not hear, or cry to you violence, and you will not save. How long shall I wait?" But where does Habakkuk end in chapter 3? He says, "My body shakes, my legs tremble beneath me, yet I will quietly wait before the Lord." Do you see the difference in Habakkuk's prayer here? He in the beginning, he's like, God, where are you? Where are you right now? Like it's taking forever. Like this suffering that's going to take place, like I don't want to be a part of it. Now in chapter 3, after spending time with the Lord, he says, I'm going to sit quietly. I'm going to wait. I'm going to watch. I'm going to wait on what the Lord's going to do. This should be screaming at all of us that spending time with God is how we see our life and our perspective change for each of us. It's not through some kind of secret formula. I wish that, for some of us, we wish like if there was like a formula we could use to get through certain things, almost like a magic pill that we take and, we grow spiritually. You cannot replace spending time with the Lord. And Habakkuk, throughout this book, we've seen this shift in him after he spent time lamenting, hearing from the Lord, lamenting, hearing from the Lord, now praying. There's a shift that has taken place, and he says, no, whatever you have, Lord, I submit to it and I wait for it. Let's look at verse 17. Though the fig tree should not blossom, nor fruit be on the vines, the produce of the olive fail, and the fields yield no food, the flock be cut off from the fold, and there be no herd in the stalls. Yet I will rejoice in the Lord, and I will take joy in the God of my salvation. God the Lord is my strength, and he makes my feet like the deer's. He makes me tread on my high places, And then he closes out to the choir master with stringed instruments. Doot, 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 doot. Like you could hear the music playing, right? It's like, here it comes, it's playing. I think that was a wedding song. I don't know what that was. You can tell how much I listen to classical music. There's a couple of things I want to point out here. Verse 17, there are two separate kinds of products that he points out. Like if we don't have these things, I'm going to trust in you. The first are luxury items. The fig tree, the fruit of the vine, wine. It talks about olives, which oil and olives were a huge part of what they did in that time, right? And even today, you go to the Middle East, if you take a trip there, you're going to go to a store and they're going to be selling olive oil everywhere. I mean, it's like, it's in every store. You go to a gas station, they got the finest olive oil in the world right there on the shelf because it's part of the culture. These are the luxury items. Now, if you remember back when you were a kid and your dad would try to sneak in like the off-brand cereal in your family, you remember those days or those weeks, those months? Like, Dad, what are Fruit Hoops? I don't know. This is in a giant bag. This is not what I'm used to. Budget was tight that month, right? Right. So the luxuries, where were the luxuries? They were gone. Like you're getting the bags of cereal, right? There's a lot of sandwiches this month. The luxuries, you're not getting steak. And some of you are like, I still buy the big bags of cereal. What are y'all talking about? Ask your kids, please. So these were the luxury items. He's talking about fig, fruit of the vine, olives, and then he gets to the second one, which are necessities, the grain, the flock, and the herds. These are sustenance. These are like things that we have to live. And what does he say? If these things fade away, if these things do not blossom, if they wither away, he says, although the season's going to be tough, without the luxuries, I trust you. Without the necessities, I still trust you. See, I'm afraid if we were to mark where we are as a church, not collective, but the church as a whole, capital C, in our Western context, I would say that most of us would be okay without the luxury. We still trust the Lord in that. But I feel like, I sense that there's a line some people wouldn't be willing to cross to say, without the necessities, I would still trust you. If you don't believe me, think back to when COVID hit and we couldn't find the right things in the stores. You ever see a grown person throw a fit in a grocery store before 2020? The officer back there in the back saying yes. Because he is who shows up whenever, right? You remember when COVID hit and all the supply chain issues, right? And you're telling your kids, like, we've never eaten this before, but we're eating it because that's all you could find, right? You got to get what you can get. We're eating all kinds of crazy stuff. But people were throwing like their character out the window because we couldn't get the right bread or the right pasta or whatever it is. Like we were upset. Like our luxuries had been interrupted. And I think over this last couple of years, it's been a good picture of where we are discipleship-wise in the church. It says, are you okay without the luxuries? Yeah, I'm going to trust you, Lord. And Habakkuk says, even without the necessities, I'll trust you, God. I rejoice in you, the God of my salvation, because Habakkuk's joy was not found in the things of life. It wasn't found in his luxuries, and it wasn't even found in his necessities. His joy was found in that he served a God that was known to rescue people and to rescue the people of God. And for us, we rejoice in that same thing. Is our joy rooted in our salvation, or is it rooted in something much more fickle than that? Where is our joy rooted at this morning? And then lastly, among the chaos of life, what does he say? He says, God the Lord is my strength. He makes my feet like the deer's. Like solid stepping. Like every step of the way, I'm able to keep my footing amongst the chaos because I'm finding my strength in the Lord. I'm not finding my strength in my discipline or my willpower, any of those things that we try to portray in this world and we want to be good at. My strength is found in the Lord, and he makes my feet steady among the chaos. Singing God's praises through the challenging times of life strengthens our faith. Today, we're going to close out the service singing a song, lifting up our voices and our hearts to the Lord. And I want us to do something this morning. I want us to remember. I want you to take inventory of your life for a moment. Just bow your heads, close your eyes for a moment. I want you to take inventory of your life for a moment. And I want you to think and reflect on some of the ways that God has provided for you, some of the ways that God has rescued you, some of the ways that God has sustained you. And I just want you to take a moment and think on that, dwell on that for a moment. Take an inventory of, ask the Holy Spirit to reveal to you those things where he has provided and sustained you and delivered you from things. And as Habakkuk was closing out his prayer to the Lord and he's spending his time with God, we see him reflecting on those things that we've been reflecting on for a few moments. That God, you've provided for me. You've rescued me. You've delivered for me. You've sustained me. You've done all the things. When I take inventory of my life, I would like to be able to brag and have some pride rise up. Look what I've done. But really when it comes down to it, Lord, it's been you the whole time. And I think for us in the room, the discipline of remembering and thinking on what he's done for us in the past, it would be good for our soul and our faith this morning if we remember those things and we sing in faith to him. Because here's what the song that we sang this morning, Do It Again, like he's done it before. And as Habakkuk, he has the same mentality, right? God, you've done it before. I'm reminding you of the things that you've done, and I know that you can do it again. I know that you can provide, so I'm going to keep focusing on those things. I'm going to close out by reading the first couple verses of Psalm 34, and then we'll stand and sing together. Verses 1-3 says this: I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall be continually in my mouth. My soul makes its boast in the Lord. Let the humble hear and be glad. Oh, magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together. So this morning, as we close out this service, we are gathering. We're going to bless the Lord and sing his praise, not our praise, but his praise. And our soul is going to boast in him. We're going to be humble. We're going to hear what the Lord has for us, and we're going to magnify the Lord and exalt his name together for what he has done in the past and how he's going to deliver us and rescue us in the future.